Thank you, Bernard.
Great.
Thank you.
We're
Great.
also privileged to have the founder CEO. Morrison, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
So let me start with.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I think so far so good. The patronage was good, but what is even more important, the discussions, the plenary was very good, and the whole concept of a national dialogue on economy for me is very important because before I agree that there have been some challenges with the Ghanaian economy, no doubt about it. Since we had the Russia-Ukraine war, the COVID, and all those externalities, and of course our own internal challenges have all led to the challenges we have in the economy today. And I think previous government and Carriga, everybody acknowledges it. And therefore, if you have a challenge, the best way to deal with it is that you discuss and come up with a strategy. And I think the government's approach of involving as many people as possible, involving the key stakeholders to bring their experiences, their ideas, to carve a new strategy going forward is very important. I remember I was part of the ChannelOne, that was done about 10 years ago. It took similar form, and I think it made a lot of impact. I remember immediately afterwards, government had to even resort to IMF and all that. So I think that what is important is that we discuss the critical issues of pertinent interest, critical issues affecting the economy, bringing all these other stakeholders together, and then getting the different perspective from different sectors, and then putting them together and clearly defining a pathway forward. And then we follow through to make sure that we implement to improve the economy that we have.
Thank you. I'll come back to you.
Well, thank you, Bernard. Listening to the president and also listening to Ishmael Yamson and Dr. Iwa Makuo speaking, it paints the picture of where we want to be, the tragedy over the past years, and where everybody in the sector now is talking about we need to look at the long-term strategy. How do we become food sufficient? How do we reduce our food import bill? How do we make sure that as a country we do have a national commitment towards financing of our own food? And for me, those are the three things that are coming up strongly. And if we can be able to work towards that and achieve that, at least for the medium term to a long-term strategy, we should be able to galvanize some forces, especially looking at the sub-region. We are getting so exposed now with the way the other countries are going about blocking their food ban and all that. This is the time where we need to invest more into our food, taking money from the extractive sector into the food sector, because the extractive sector will diminish in no time, but we need to keep ourselves food secure as a country, not for 10 years, not for 20 years, for as long as the world will continue to exist. There is that, there must be that commitment from both civil society groups, religious group, government, to make sure that we are addressing our food security concern.
Wonderful. Now, AGI, you've always.
I mean, we foresaw this way back. We knew that these donor supports will not be there forever. At some point, you receive a bit of support. So what is important, when you receive such support, how do you channel it to the productive areas so that it can have a multiplier effect? One day when they withdraw their support, they will be resilient enough to sustain whatever you are doing. So we foresaw this happening. Unfortunately, over the years, I don't think that we've channeled the support to the critical areas of industry and agriculture and the linkages that gives us that kind of sustainability. And today, here we are, they're saying we are withdrawing a lot of our support. But I think that it's unfortunate, but then it also creates opportunities, as we're saying, because if there are no such support, how do we look inward? How do we ensure that we actually create opportunities for our own companies, for our own members, for industries, for agriculture, and then feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and produce a lot of the things we need in this country. When we do that, we'll be able to create the jobs and generate the taxes. So it is possible. It is possible in the sense that if we indeed empower a few, and we are looking at, you are talking to Maurice, you're talking about agriculture. I'm talking about industry, and we're talking about the linkages between the two. If you develop the value chains very well, and agriculture is producing, and industry is there to offtake, and then there is the linkage between the two, the logistics and everything, the chain works. We will see that we produce a lot, and we'll be producing them at a competitive price. When we do so, at a competitive cost, and we sell at a competitive price, we can capture our own market and can even export outside, because we have a lot of opportunities in terms of the resources. So we see the challenge thrown to us as industry, but we also want to have a conducive business environment that makes it work, because we've talked a lot about macroeconomic today, macroeconomic environment. If you don't have your macroeconomic framework in place in the right manner, CD must not, the exchange rate shouldn't be that bad. It should be within reasonable range. Interest costs should not be that high so that people can borrow and do business. Inflation must be contained within reasonable range. When you get all this macroeconomic right, and then also electricity, a lot of factors that are not within the control of the businesses have to be set right, because that is set at the government level. Let's get it right, and the businesses will live up to the expectation and do business. So I agree, it's a challenge that is thrown to us, but that challenge also requires some support, some setting by the government, and then private sector will take advantage. And as industries, we can be sure that we produce to feed the masses.
So there is a ministry now. Who would come and be taking part in the economic development of create an agribusiness law. How important is that to the trade agribusiness? What do you think we can protect tomorrow during that time?
Well, Bernard, this point in time gives us the opportunity to redefine our agriculture sector and the agro-industry sector. Agribusiness permits at both levels, either the primary level or the mid or the upstream. We are very much integrated. What we need to be looking at is to align all our agriculture sector development activities. If we talk about AU, African Union, NEPAD, they are looking at special economic zones. UNIDO is also looking at the agro-industrial parks. If you've heard the President, His Excellency talk, he said he's committed to reducing food, the cost of food production, the cost of food on the market for consumers. We're also looking at increasing our food competitiveness, productivity, how to increase our production. But what we need to be looking at is we need to contextualize the current skills we have in the country, in the agriculture sector. Do we have the kind of skills that are able to impact on productivity and be competitive? Two, do we have the kind of financing regime that makes it easy, just like my brother said was talking about, to be able to access credit? And if you look at where the His Excellency has been engaging the various stakeholders, you see that he's putting a lot of commitment in place. But we at the sector, we are looking at, for the over 12 years now, we've been talking about how do we develop the agro-industry. Agro-industry cannot be developed in the opium. We need to look at the raw material cancer, and I think my brother will also agree with me on that. Take each of the commodities and develop the value chain analysis. Then we can say that this is the base. So when we say what is the wealth of Ghana's agriculture sector, then we can know that this is the wealth of the Ghana. So what, for instance, when you take poultry, you can do the value chain analysis of poultry. It's a policy, the poultry sector is worth $2 billion. You take the rice sector, you can say the rice sector is worth $5 billion. So then you move to the horticulture, you move to aquaculture, you move to all the other externalities. Based on that, you can say, okay, Ghana's agriculture sector and the agro-industry sector is worth maybe 50 billion. So when you are going for financing regime or some kind of financing system, you know how to align the financing to the priorities and the regime of the value chain that is of our priority. For instance, if you take poultry employs more than 50% of the value chain players, from rice to maize, the feed millers, the feed additives, the poultry farmers, those processing, and also the cold chain people. We're talking about almost 8 to 9 value chain players actively. So it is a sector where we need to prioritize. Look at tomatoes. Ghana is the largest consumer of tomatoes in West Africa per capita. And you see that most of the continental and the regional companies have moved to Ghana now. Some are doing about 10,000 hectares of tomatoes to feed the factory. We are importing tomatoes from Morocco. We are importing tomatoes from Burkina Faso. Tomatoes are coming from South Africa to feed industries here. How do we make sure that our industries are aligned with the right variety that we have, the right condition, so that we'll be able to be competitive, even if we have to add value and export? Those are the competitive things we need to be looking at.
Well, first of all, I'm happy that this is taking place before the budget is read. So we are assuming and we are hoping that the inputs here will reflect in the budget. That's very important. Being reflected in the budget also means that it will go through appropriation, Parliament, as it becomes a law. And therefore, government, once you put in the budget, you are required to, implement some of them. Now, the key thematic areas, they are all very important to private sector development, be it infrastructure or core private sector activity or macroeconomic issues. They're all very important. And my expectation is that for each one of them, there will be clear, defined targets to be achieved. There will be clear, identifiable institutions and organizations to play specific roles. Those will also be defined. And then when it's all defined, then there will be clear strategy for implementing the very measure that we have agreed that will help reset the economy. When we have agreed on that, then we expect that implementation will take place.
So what we want to achieve, who's supposed to do it, when we want to do it, and how we want to do it.
Yes.
These are the 4 things you want to see.
And then I also want to hear the monitoring mechanism for monitoring all that has been said will be done, and then how we get it done. The president mentioned something which I think is very important. He's saying that he's going to be involving key stakeholders in the process of implementation, and I think that's also very important. So we are expecting to be invited and to be involved a lot more to make sure we achieve the results.
Let me give a final word for you. Your key expectations.
One of the key things we're looking at, we want to thank the president for creating the agribusiness ministry. Now, how do we drive the ministry in the agribusiness? We want the agribusiness development and regulatory authority now to come in place. We're talking about the ease of doing business in the industry. So you want to see the Food and Drugs Authority, the Standard Authority, all those places coming together in one, one-stop shop activity. Now, while that is going on, we want to see commitment in terms of financing for the agriculture sector, commitment in terms of addressing the Kampala Declaration of the African Union, how we are addressing our shortfalls in food importation. Then also we need to be very deliberate on industries development. And I think that this is where the 24-hour economy comes in. Going forward, we want to see clarity in our food systems, in that it supports both the skill sector, it supports both the private sector, and it supports all our food security strategies as a country.
Thank you very much. We're still here.